Hi. So you've probably heard about the Apple Mail iOS 15 changes, and maybe you're wondering what that means for marketers right now. So we're going to have a look at what's happening, what's going to be affected, and what you can do about it. So what is happening with this update? Well, ultimately, Apple is trying to make it easier for users to hide their online activity to increase their privacy. And it may be frustrating for marketers, but this is overall a good thing for consumers. So what will the impact of this be? Well, if you're using Apple Mail, what it will do is hide your IP address, hide your location, and hide the information about whether or not you've opened an email from the person who sent you the email. So email providers like HubSpot, MailChimp, Constant Contact, any of those services. So they won't be able to see whether or not someone has opened an email. It does that by loading the pixel that is embedded within an email to say that it's already been opened. So rather than seeing your open rates drop, you're going to see them really inflated. And that means that that information is no longer going to be accurate. Now, for some people, that information wasn't fantastically accurate before now. And this is something that's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit with this update, because if you open an email on Outlook, for example, and you don't click the download pictures button, that pixel might not be activated. So your open rates would be lower than they actually were. So anyone that's always relied on open rates, this is a really good wake-up call to step away from open rates as a key metric. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about open rates. Why does it matter that these are going to be inaccurate? Because ultimately, all of the people using Apple Mail will appear to have opened your email. And so you might get a much higher open rate than you've ever seen before, which would be very exciting if it were true, but we don't know how many of those people actually open the email. If you use an email provider that can tell you that how many people have opened your email across different mail providers, whether that's Outlook, Gmail, Apple Mail, and others, then you might be able to get a sense of what proportion of your database is no longer accurately reporting. That might be of interest. But ultimately, open rates are simply not going to give you accurate data. Once this change is fully rolled out to everybody, you'll be able to start seeing trends in your open rates, but ultimately your open rates are going to skyrocket and your engagement is going to stay the same, or hopefully improve if you're doing a really good job each month. But the open rate and engagement rate are going to separate quite considerably. Aside from open rates, what else is going to change? Well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, location is something that the new update is going to hide. So if you plan to send emails and the email provider you use has a way to schedule those different emails to go at different times of the day based on the recipient's time zone, that functionality is not going to work with Apple Mail anymore because you're not allowed to know where they are. So if you have a geographically diverse, international database, that function to say, send it at 9 a.m. local time to the recipient isn't going to function effectively with the Apple Mail users. It'll still be fine for everyone else, but bear in mind, Apple making this change means that other providers may follow suit. So that location targeting can be a problem. And if you have smart content in your emails that is dependent on location rather than dependent on a particular property or field that you have in your CRM, then again, that location-based targeting isn't going to function effectively. So you need to go in and check any of your smart content to make sure it's not relying on information that's no longer going to be provided. As well as checking your smart content, as I mentioned in the previous section, you need to go in and look at any automations, any triggers, any workflows, any sequences that you have set up in your email provider or your marketing system that is based on activity that will no longer be visible. So you might have an automation that says, if someone has opened this email but not clicked on it, send them a follow-up a couple of days later. That's not going to work for people using Apple Mail. So you can't rely on just open rate as a trigger for an automation. You need to start looking at different ways to build the functionality that you want. Now, sometimes it might be you can use how many people have clicked on an email. You might be able to use how many people have received the email. Neither of those tell you just the people that have opened the email. So you may need to tweak the next steps in your sequence as well. If you're responding to someone saying, hey, I noticed you opened the email, but you haven't done anything. Is there any way I can help you? That's not going to work because they may not have opened the email. Apple may have triggered that pixel to show it as opened, and the person's not even noticed that they've received it. So you need to readjust how you do those automations. It's not just the trigger, it's what activity is triggered in that automation. What messaging are you using? So go back through, review your smart content, review your automations and follow-ups, just to make sure everything is aligned with how things are working now. Something else you might use email open rates for is lead scoring. So if you do that, go back in, check your lead scoring parameters, because if you give someone extra points, if they're opening emails from you, then you're going to be giving them points that actually don't reflect their level of engagement. Lead scoring can be a really powerful thing to have happening in your CRM, where it automatically assigns people a score based on their activity and their engagement with you and your company, but you don't want to overinflate it with something that's no longer accurate. So that's another area that you want to go back in and remove opened email as a category, because you just can't rely on it. So overall, what can you do about this change? Apart from going in and checking everything that might be affected in your marketing system, what can you do about it? Well, ultimately, you can't change this. This is something that's happening and may well increase in size and scope as other members of the industry join in. But what you should be focused on is creating the best possible result for your recipients. Open rate's never been 100% accurate anyway, and really what you want is people who are engaging with your content. So you want people who click through. You want people who not only open the email, but take action based on it. Either they reply to it, or they click a link in the email, or they watch the video that you've embedded. So shift your focus onto KPIs that show more than passive engagement. Because opening an email, it's not a great indicator of engagement. It's better than nothing, and it's obviously better than not opening the email. But don't rely on just that passive engagement. Once someone takes action, they have engaged with you much more fully. So make sure the content in your email is optimized to its best potential to get people clicking, to get people interacting with your content. And focus on click-through rates, focus on conversions, focus on leads generated from your email campaigns as your key metric, because open rates, they're just the first part of that buyer's journey. So let's look at the more valuable parts of the buyer's journey, shift our focus onto them so that we're not concerned at this data that we're now missing. And don't get me wrong, we love data, and having data that I know is not accurate, having a number show up on my reports that I know is artificially inflated is really frustrating. So having a focus on data that I can rely on, data that is accurate and does give me something I can work with, that's the way forward. Focus on making your marketing the best it can be, and then we don't need to worry too much about whether or not the open rates are the figure that they used to be.